Hello. The most unstylish person in the entire universe here. I swear I wouldn't know style if it hit me on the face. Because yeah, this hat, yeah, not. It's not a choice. Of course, it's not a statement. It's just that my hair is like a mammoth, like a huge mess. There's no sense of trying to really, finagle with it. But you're not here to talk about that, I hope. Here to talk about books again, because I am actually quite intrigued by this one. Kind of hate that word. It's kind of hammy. Intriguing. Intrigue. Could also mean like, conspiracy, like intrigue. Anyway, but it's Machado de Assis, the posthumous memoirs of Cubas. I think it's Cubas, or I don't know if you pronounce the S in that. Maybe I'm thinking French. Yeah. David Eggers gives it a good review. A glittering masterwork. This translation is a glorious gift to the world. To my great dismay, I have not actually heard of Machado. Well, I might have heard of him in passing, but I have been trying to get some foray into the Brazilian literature, and I guess I would have been 2 to 3 years back with like Jorges and all that. But I haven't read much. I guess, well, Brazilian, he's Argentine. I'm sorry. South American literature as a whole. That's what I meant. So don't try to to get me on that, but it's Brazilian, and then there's also Colombian with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I'd like to do eventually. I will get around to doing either Strange Pilgrims or the other one. He's a really good one, 100 Years in Solitude. But yeah, this is a very interesting book. It was published in, I think, 1889, right? Whereas Cubas was born in, I believe, 1881, I think. So much, and I think he was about middle-aged when he wrote this. Assis was a half, he was born into a slave family, I think, but he was able to kind of work his way up and get kind of educated in Brazil, and this is back when they had, awful system of slavery. This was, when he was born, I think 1839, I think. I'm probably messing that up. But he was born to he was half black, half white American, or, in slavery, like kind of indentured servitude family. But he was given free liberty at a young age, I think, and he basically went into writing. And he wrote the memoirs about Cubas, posthumous memoirs, I'm sorry, as shortly after his friend died, one of his best friends, and he saw, kind of death coming, and that kind of gave him this spurned this, prompted this idea for a novel. And it's very meta, actually. It's told from the point of view of the titular Brás Cubas. And that's the name Cuba. I think he comes from, originally from like barrel making or something. He goes throughout the whole thing. He starts right off the bat, saying like, it's very witty, it's very wry and detached. The way this man is a merchant family. He's from a very kind of like, not like super rich, like do whatever you want up rich, but he still struggles in life a little bit. But he's kind of like upper middle class is like how I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But this. He's just kind of, he's just very detached, and he's very, he's been, like, his entire life has been kind of this series of kind of, like circuitous, kind of repetitious things, like, I always think of it as like a bit like I don't want to say like a Don Quixote, but he also gets some to Don Quixote as well. And also the Tristram Shandy, darn, I'm not remembering, Tristram Shandy by... I can't remember the name of the author who did that, but it was a Irish author, and he's basically, it's kind of like the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy. I think he references that a lot too, but it's not without originality, and it's only just derivations of other works. It's quite unique and unparalleled in its tone, and it's very kind of like wry, the first chapter is just like to the worms that are devouring at my corpse, I think, or something like that. It's you see it right here. There's a whole introduction on the translation too, which is I find very interesting as well. I usually skip the introductions for fear of it spoiling it all. But Pastor to the reader mentions Stendhal a lot too, I noticed. But he says in Pastor, he talks about, but he says, like, to the worm that first gnawed at the cold flesh of my cadaver, I dedicate as a fond remembrance these posthumous memoirs. So yeah, he goes through his life, and it's just interesting that it's so meta in the sense that this was written like 40, 50 years before like the modernists like Joyce, or especially the postmodernists, I guess. Like you wouldn't have seen till like the 60s with maybe Pynchon and maybe like David Foster Wallace and maybe Don DeLillo and all these, modern writers, modern and postmodern alike, all use these type of devices of, posthumous memoirs. Like you can see it with Nabokov too, kind of, beyond the grave. It's just this idea of like, how is it even possible? Is it like his soul? Is it assuming that he has a soul that's just transcends death and is able to kind of just reminisce over the past, or is it just kind of like, hey, just take, just entertain this idea, this crazy idea, take a Kierkegaardian leap of faith and just say, hey, what if there's a soul? And that's what sake of novel, that's what makes it so interesting, is that so it's kind of, he says this very kind of just willy-nilly, as if it's like totally normal, like, and that's in a sense like kind of Kafkaesque too. It's like acting as if these magically surreal things happening around him is like totally normal, and he's like, oh yes, this is so yeah, there's quite a bit of humor in it, but it's very dry, and it's very depressing too. He's like, it's been critics have claimed that Schopenhauer was an influence because of the pessimism, the philosophical pessimism in this, is like near the end of the novel, especially, without giving too much away, because it is really a treat to read if you kind of give your time to. He says near the end that basically childhood is like a curse, and it's like, the only thing that I've done, paraphrasing here obviously, the only thing that I've done that I'm actually proud of, aside from kind of, like, because he's kind of slid through life just kind of doing, attaining certain merchant roles, attaining things like a counselor role and this and that, and there's other humorous things where he's like, I did not get my promotion or something, or like, and it's basically a series of commas. I'll probably not be able to find it, but it's basically, it's not full stops, or it's like a bunch of commas. Like he's like, today I did not get my, I didn't get the position that I wanted or something. And there's just, and then like there's some of these, they range from but it's like, yeah, here it is. Okay, so he's like, Virgilia, or the age-old dialogue of Adam and Eve, like it's very simple, like that. It's just very, it's like Cubas, Virgilia. Virgilia was his love that is consistent throughout. His first one, I think he talks about, is I think a prostitute named Marcella, and she, he has like, that's kind of his, kind of a rite of passage type of love for him in the beginning of the novel, when he's like a youth of like maybe in his late teens, and then he goes into his 20s and 30s, and I think he falls in love with Virgilia, who's actually already married, and they carry on an affair that lasts for years, and in fact she's like the one that's kind of with him at his sickbed, so they kind of like remain on good terms. I think it's kind of an on again, off again thing. She also has a child, but she also doesn't really love her husband. Was it Lobo Neves? I'm not sure. So yeah, that's kind of like his consistent love, is like, it's kind of the main time you actually see kind of like passion coming from Cubas is when he's mentioning Virgilia and maybe Marcella, but more so the latter. So it's like that, and there's also a lot of there's a lot of him talking about his own philosophy of humanism, and then this other character of Quincy Borbaz, who's like a philosopher, and he's like butts heads a lot with him too, because he's saying like humanism, it's like, here's my philosophy on humanism. It's like, again, very tongue-in-cheek, very wry, but he gives it near the end. I think he's like talking about like, he mentions like a lot of like Roman like a lot of it's very Machado de Assis was also a great scholar too. Like he was like imbued just with a lot of like Hellenistic themes as well, like a lot of like references to Greek and Roman times. Helvetius's principle. Conclusion: Helvetius's principle held true in my case. The difference is that the interest in question was not apparent but hidden. So yeah, there's one like a uselessness chapter, however. But either I'm very much mistaken or I've just written a useless chapter, and that's it. So yeah, there's a very interesting. Some of them are pages long, several pages, and then others are like a sentence. So yeah, it's definitely recommend. Yeah, like the one takeaway I think is that his philosophy of pessimism being near the end when he talks about like bringing children into this world, and he's like, that's the only one thing that I haven't done that I'm proud of is the fact that I did not bear children to carry on the misery of this life, or something to that effect. Might be able to find it. All right, wasting time scrolling through, and nice. We can always edit this out, but the alienist green. The Insolvable Problem. The Insolvable Problem, 24 Hours, and what's her name? Dr. Braz Cubas. My ideas and political. I could not believe my eyes. I rubbed them once, twice, and reread this extraordinary, inopportune, wholly enigmatic declaration. If he had nothing to do with the parties, then was something as ordinary as the publication of a newspaper to him? Then what was something as ordinary? Not every citizen who finds an administration good or bad takes it upon himself to make declarations of the sort of the press, nor is obliged to. Cautrin's intruding on the matter was truly a mystery, and his personal aggression toward me not less so. So yeah, he's a lot of kind of like conflict between him and different kind of members of the class, and kind of vying for certain positions and stuff, and yeah, and I guess you could see it as a little bit petty. You get the sense that his life wasn't particularly astounding. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's. But then again, that's kind of like what the takeaway of the book is, like, yeah, life is just suffering, and you fall in love, and then maybe that redeems it in a sense. But then again, it's like the suffering also stems from that affair that you have, because you do a lot of messed up things just to get somebody to reciprocate that feeling. So it's like it's a give or take. So I certainly recommend it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.